This video shows the building of Richgrove Beach, USA by Richgrovemayor. This video starts with a platform base that I showed you how to build in my last video called Platform Building for a Model City or Train Layout. Once this is built and you kind of have an idea of the space that you have to use, you start getting in the idea of what you're looking to build and the space that you have to build it in. This is a great way to start. The next thing I like to do is start with the background. In this particular design, I'm using sky. So I painted in the sky, and you're going to notice that I actually added a little bit more detail at the base. One of the things that helped me with designing this city is painting the base black, so that as I lay out the buildings, I have a general idea of streets and the kind of space that I'm going to need to make my design. Then the next thing I like to do is take out the buildings that I know I'm going to use to see how they're going to fit in the city. Kind of getting an idea of what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to decide what product I'm going to use to make my city blocks. This particular time I'm going to use these wood planks. You could use popsicle sticks and drywall mud to make your forms if you wanted to. I use very small brads to attach my wood. It's time to get the first pieces in the city. Because of the size of the platform, I usually start in the frontmost part of the platform and work backwards. Once my platform edge is in, I can start laying out the city streets. Now, to build the first intersection, I use actual cars to make sure the spacing is right. I knew I wanted a intersection down Main Street. Using the same idea for spacing without this intersection, it sets the size for all of the other streets' width. Once the streets are laid out, now it's time to build the platforms for each of the sections of the city. These platforms are specifically measured so that they're the right size. In this particular one, you can see how I've progressed, making the intersections as you can actually see the streets lay themselves out. Kind of an interesting process here. As we move further along in this video, you will see how they actually lay out when I put the buildings in, so you can kind of get an idea of what I'm building. These are very specific to what buildings you're using and how you're using them with the layout. As you can see, this is very different from the one I built before. As we lay out more of the city, you'll see how much it grows and becomes an actual looking city. You can actually see the streets at this point. Okay, let's throw some buildings at this so you can get an idea of what I'm building. As you can see from the way this lays out, how each building fits in the slot. Now the next section, as you can tell, is actually 3rd Street, what you're looking at here. And as we wrap around on this side, you're going to start seeing 2nd Street. Keep in mind, 2nd Street is the street that's going to go all the way over to the other side of the city. So this part of the area is very important that we get this right. Because if this is wrong, you're going to screw up the whole rest of the design of the city. So it's real important to make sure it all fits. Now this is 4th Street, which in a second is going to wrap around and show you the other half of 3rd Street. But one of the things I want to tell you about is this is the end of the traditional city as you would know it. Next up is going to be the actual buildings that take different parking and so forth and so on. And that is the hardest part to design. Okay, here's where we're at so far. You'll notice I also got a gas station and a Dairy Queen down there on the corner. Kind of give you the general idea of what it's going to look like. When I move to the next section, it's not as simple because the buildings are different sizes with different space needs. Plus, they still got to fit into the city grid. When I put the buildings in place, you can further see the design of the car wash and how it's going to lay out with the city and the extra buildings in the background. The process continues with the next section. I have to use buildings that work with the space that I have to work with. It's kind of trial and error to make it all fit. Just like before, when I start putting the buildings back in there, you can really start to see the section take shape. Keep in mind that some of the buildings have a lot of space between them. That's for extra parking. When you're at the end of the space in this section, this is when it gets the most difficult, because you have to find the right building that fills up the space without looking too cramped. Now once the factory is in place, this section is ready for the next part. To review this section without the buildings in place, the reason for the different color wood is because I've reused some old pieces of wood. Placing all the buildings back shows the progress that I've made and that it all looks good together, because that's the hard part. This last section has to be done as one. All these buildings basically had to work together to make it into the design or be left out. When I design a city, I have a general idea what I'm going to use each of the buildings for before I put them in the design. As you can see, these 4 buildings all serve an exact purpose, as you'll see further in the video. Sometimes I build a perfect looking section, but I use too much space, and to make it fit better, you have to kind of adjust what you're doing. Here you will notice that I trimmed the back areas of the gas station and the Dairy Queen so that the other buildings would fit and flow better together with these. With the changes I had to make to the other 2 sections, this section had to be designed all together as one. Without that, it would have never come together. So I made this one you're looking at here is kind of the corner to the next street that you haven't seen yet. And then the building behind it, which you're going to see here in a second. They all had to flow together, use this kind of the shared parking and that kind of thing to make this whole section work. Otherwise, it just wouldn't look right. Now this section, because I designed it all as one, I added all the buildings back so you could see it all as one. The McDonald's, the BP, and of course the cinema behind it. This section took a lot of area to do. Plus you have to have parking for all the people that are going to go to these establishments. That's why I had to trim the area prior to it to get it all to flow better. And as you see it all as one flow, it looks really nice together as an all one. Now this one I designed as several buildings together on the same platform, kind of like I did the main city. You'll see how this all comes together in a second. First thing I'm going to do is put the condos in the very back section of this particular platform. Next thing I'm going to put is a little hotel that's right on the beach. Okay, as you noticed, I added a wall behind the little hotel there. This is going to be the parking area for the amusement park area, which is the next section. The next section is going to be for my amusement park. I've been looking forward to designing one of these for a long time. With the fort and some of the amusement park rides in place, the amusement park takes shape. This section is the very last section, and to do it really takes some planning to use all of the space available. Here I decided to add a convenience store and some little shops to fill up the last space. Okay, city's laid out, kind of have an idea of what we're doing. This winded up kind of being a touristy area, amusement parks, little shopping, some gas, some food, cinemas, places to stay. Next section, of course, is still the main part of the city. You'll notice I got my false fronts there on 1st Street. I've got 2nd Street, got 3rd Street, going into 4th Street. Now, as we go into this section, it's kind of like a business section. Kind of got your factory back in the corner there. You've got your Greyhound. You've got a detail place. Kind of have this worked out. Then, of course, the next section is going to be my city services section. That's kind of how I finish off my design. Okay, it's time to put away the buildings and get out the mud and start making this look like a real city. What I prefer is drywall mud and some drywall tools and smooth it out. Now it's time to sand it and get it as smooth as possible. I do this process of putting on the mud and smoothing it out and sanding it and putting a little bit more mud on the top of it and sanding it out about 3 to 4 times to get the look I'm after. One little extra step I use is after I do all of the sanding and everything and get my final coat on, I like to wet sand the whole thing to just kind of give it that last opportunity to smooth anything out I missed. Okay, the next step is to pick out a color that you want your sidewalks to be. I got lucky because I happened to be there at the right time, and one of the people that were buying paint at the same time when I was a contractor who was actually trying to match actual concrete. So this color worked out really well. You can see once you get this laid in, you can actually start to see some details to the actual blocks themselves. The next part, you add the black. Of course, that to me is one of the major things that make a big difference so that the city starts to take shape. From one end of the city to the other, it makes a huge difference. To me, this is almost where I feel like the city is almost done. But wait, there's a little bit more to do. The next thing I like to do is go and get some automotive pinstripes, both in white and yellow, and start accenting the streets, the access roads, and some of the parking lots. Makes a huge difference. Well, it works just like you would think. Just simply start laying out your stripes, laying out your parking lot. You can measure this, or you can do it any way you want to. I kind of eyeball it because I think it looks better done that way. I, of course, use the tweezers to make sure it weighs down exactly where I want it to, and cut it with an X-Acto knife. As you can see, by adding the stripes, it makes a huge difference. With the yellow, the roads actually start to come alive. You can see the crosswalks, you can see where you can park. You can kind of have a whole idea of what the whole thing's starting to look like. A city. Okay, one of my favorite things is adding back the buildings. As you can see, this makes a huge difference for the city. It actually starts to take shape. That's something I really like to see. Means all of this work that I've done is starting to make something and look like something, finally. Now here we're looking at 4th Street, going to 3rd Street. Adding the buildings back finishes off the city. It really gives it a nice look, gives it a finished look. Still missing some details still, and we're going to get to those shortly. As we go around the corner here to 2nd Street, looking downtown at 1st Street, you can see it makes a huge difference. That's why I like to show the city at this point, because it really, really, really comes together. Well, I started talking about adding the little details. This is what I mean. Notice the fact that we now have really started to make the amusement park look like an amusement park. We've added some rides, we've added those little details that make it into an amusement park. From the flags, from the Ferris wheel, to the little eating spots that you have, you'll notice the little itty-bitty details. These are the hard things to find, these are the hard things to make work. Take the pool inside of the castle. Just kind of hit me to do it that way. Don't know why, just decided to make it a giant swimming pool inside. Kind of turned out kind of better than I thought. Who knew? As I zoom out, you can take a look at the whole thing as one whole piece. Makes a huge difference. Because this city is much smaller than the last one I did, you're going to notice that I spent a lot more time on landscaping and things that are in this city. Take, for example, these intersections. Each one of these were custom built. Actually, I did have some help with that. But nonetheless, they look really sharp. You'll notice that each one of them is an individual piece that could be moved for cleaning. Keep in mind, cleaning this city is important. So when I painted it, and everything I use in here is washable paint, so I can literally pick it up, wash it, put it back down. Look how big the intersections look now that you've got the shrubbery, you've got the traffic lights up, you've got all of the things that make it a city. But it's missing still one thing. Yes, that's going to be the vehicles. That is the next thing I'm going to do in my next video, is I'm actually going to show you adding the vehicles and adding those extra little details, because I got some other things up my sleeve that I'll share with you in that video. Stay tuned. Working on this as a hobby, it took me about a year to make the progress that you see here. Keep in mind, this is a hobby, something you do in your spare time, just like I have. That's why it took so long. Thank you for watching Making of Richgrove Beach by Richgrovemayor. The next video coming will be Richgrove Beach Revealed by Richgrovemayor.